The envelope sits on the kitchen counter, unopened. It has been there for 6 days. Every morning it is seen. Every evening it is passed. The hand does not reach for it. The eyes slide away. The body knows what it contains before the mind consciously names it. A bill, a statement, a reminder, something requiring attention, something requiring action. And the action never comes, not because of forgetting or carelessness, but because the moment attention moves toward the envelope, something in the nervous system activates. A heaviness, a fog, a sense of being pulled underwater. The body goes still, the mind goes blank, and the envelope remains. This is not procrastination or laziness. This is freeze, a physiological response to threat, and for some people, money is the threat. What if your financial paralysis is not a character flaw, but a trauma response? What if every unopened bill, every avoided bank statement, every delayed decision is your nervous system trying to protect you from something it perceives as dangerous? What if your inaction is protection, not failure? Today, we examine the financial freeze response, the dorsal vagal shutdown that occurs when money becomes a dissociation trigger. We explore how shame, scarcity, and overwhelm can lock the nervous system into immobilization, why this looks like irresponsibility but functions as protection, and why traditional advice about just doing it fails when the problem is not motivation but neurophysiology. As you listen, notice something. When you think about your own financial tasks, the bills you need to pay, the accounts you should check, the decisions you have been avoiding, what happens in your body? Not your thoughts, your body. That response matters more than the explanation. Does your chest get heavier? Does your breathing get shallow? Does a fog descend over your mind? Does your body want to go somewhere else, even while sitting still? Because the financial freeze response is somatic. It lives in the body before it reaches conscious thought. And until you understand it as a nervous system state rather than a personal failure, you will keep trying to think your way out of something that can only be shifted through the body. The freeze response is one of 3 survival states identified by polyvagal theory. Most people know fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system's mobilization response when threat is detected. But there is a third option, freeze, immobilization, the dorsal vagal complex activating to shut the system down. This happens when fight or flight are not options, when you cannot escape the threat, when you cannot overpower it, when the only way to survive is to become very, very still. In nature, this is the animal going limp in the predator's jaws, the deer collapsing motionless, hoping the threat loses interest, the child dissociating during abuse they cannot escape. Freeze is a last resort survival mechanism, profoundly protective. And here is what makes freeze so insidious. It does not feel protective. It feels like failure, like weakness, like you are broken in some fundamental way. Because unlike fight or flight, which are active responses, freeze is passive. It is the absence of action, the inability to move. And in a culture that valorizes productivity and agency, freeze looks like laziness. But it is not. Freeze is your nervous system making a calculation. It is assessing that the threat is too overwhelming, that action will make things worse, that the safest option is to shut down, to go numb, to disappear internally while remaining physically present. And it is calculating survival, not success. And for many people, money triggers this response. Why? Because money, for those with financial trauma, is not neutral. It is not just information, it is a reminder of scarcity, of shame, of powerlessness, of past situations where resources were insufficient and survival felt uncertain. When you open that bill, your nervous system does not register "this is information I need to process." It registers "this is danger." And if the danger feels overwhelming, if you do not have enough to pay it, if opening it means confronting how bad things are, if it activates memories of past financial catastrophe, your system makes a decision. It freezes. The body goes heavy. The mind goes foggy. You feel suddenly exhausted, detached, like you were watching yourself from far away. This is not avoidance as a conscious choice. This is dissociation as a protective response. And the envelope remains unopened, because your nervous system has decided that not knowing is safer than knowing. This is protection disguised as paralysis. Research into financial avoidance reveals something crucial. When people experience financial scarcity, financial information functions as a scarcity cue. It triggers negative emotions, worry, shame, panic, and the brain, wired to avoid pain, learns to avoid the trigger. Studies using eye tracking technology found that people in financial difficulty literally look away from financial information. Their gaze avoids bank balances, bill amounts, debt totals. This is not conscious. This is the nervous system deploying an avoidance strategy at the neurological level before conscious awareness. And the more overwhelming the financial situation, the stronger the avoidance, because the information is not just unpleasant, it is perceived as threatening. Opening the bill means confronting how much you owe. Checking the account means seeing how little is there. And if your nervous system learned, through past experience, that financial insufficiency means danger, means eviction, hunger, loss of safety, then these numbers are not neutral data, they are threat cues. And the threat cues trigger defensive responses. In some people, fight, anger, blame, aggression toward institutions or others. In other people, flight, frantic productivity, working multiple jobs, constant motion to avoid the stillness where panic lives. But in many people, freeze. By the time avoidance appears, the calculation has already been made. What you are experiencing now is the downstream consequence of that decision. And this is where the cycle becomes self-perpetuating. Because avoiding the bill does not make it go away, it accumulates late fees. Avoiding the account does not stop the charges, they overdraw. Avoiding the decision does not resolve the problem, it compounds. And as the situation worsens, the threat level increases, which makes the freeze response stronger, which makes avoidance more likely, which makes the situation worse. The cycle tightens, and the person trapped in it feels increasingly helpless, ashamed, and convinced that they are fundamentally incapable of handling money. But they are not incapable, they are just frozen. Research into shame and financial hardship found that shame increases withdrawal behaviors. When people feel ashamed of their financial situation, they disengage. They stop looking. They stop asking for help. They isolate. Not because they do not care, but because shame is an emotion that makes you want to hide, to disappear, to not be seen in your perceived inadequacy. Most people don't realize shame is physiological, not just emotional. And what is freeze if not a neurobiological form of hiding? Laziness is a moral judgment masquerading as an explanation. It is a narrative imposed on freeze responses by people who do not understand nervous system states. Laziness implies choice, implies that action is available and deliberately refused, implies a character flaw, a lack of discipline, motivation, and responsibility. But freeze is not a choice, it is a state, a neurophysiological configuration that removes access to action. You cannot just do it. when your dorsal vagal complex has activated. You cannot push through when your nervous system has shut down the motor circuits that enable movement. Laziness does not make your body heavy, freeze does. Laziness does not make your mind fog over, dissociation does. Laziness does not create the sensation of being underwater, of watching yourself from a distance, of knowing what you should do but being unable to mobilize. Dorsal vagal shutdown does. Your body isn't resisting responsibility, it's conserving energy. And conflating the two is not just inaccurate, it is cruel, because it takes a protective response to overwhelming threat and reframes it as a moral failing. It adds shame to a system already overwhelmed by shame, and shame, as we have seen, deepens the freeze. The person who cannot open the bill is not lazy. They are in a state of immobilization triggered by a nervous system that has learned to perceive financial information as threat. The person who cannot make the call is not irresponsible. They are experiencing dorsal vagal activation that has shut down their capacity for action. The person who knows exactly what they need to do but cannot do it is not weak. They are frozen, and freeze is a survival mechanism, not a character flaw. Nothing needs to be fixed right now, just understood. When you reframe financial paralysis as freeze response, everything changes, because freeze has an antidote, laziness does not. You cannot shame someone out of laziness, it does not work that way, but you can help a nervous system come out of freeze, because freeze is a state, and states can shift. The neuroscience clarifies why willpower fails against freeze. Your autonomic nervous system operates on a hierarchy. At the top is ventral vagal, the state of safety, social engagement, and connection. This is where you feel calm, present, capable of action. This is the state where you can think clearly, make decisions, and execute tasks. Below that is sympathetic activation, fight or flight, mobilization, anxiety, urgency, energy to act, still functional though stressed. And below that is dorsal vagal, freeze, shutdown, immobilization, conservation mode. This is the oldest survival response, the most primitive, the one that activates when everything else has failed. When you are in dorsal vagal, you do not have access to ventral vagal capacities. You cannot think clearly. You cannot feel connected. You cannot mobilize energy for action. The system is offline, and offline systems cannot be commanded online. You cannot think your way from dorsal vagal to ventral vagal, because thought requires prefrontal cortex activity, and in dorsal vagal shutdown, the prefrontal cortex is not in charge, the brainstem is, and the brainstem does not respond to logic, it responds to sensation, to safety cues, to shifts in physiological state. This is why just do it fails, why telling someone in financial freeze to be responsible or face your problems does not work. They are not refusing, they are physiologically unable. Their nervous system is not in a state that permits action. Think of it like trying to start a car that has no gas. The problem is not that the driver lacks motivation. The problem is that the system required for movement is not functional. Financial freeze is running out of nervous system fuel. No amount of self-criticism fills the tank. Your body is in conservation mode, shutting down non-essential functions, rationing energy, and from this state, opening a bill feels like running a marathon. The demand exceeds the available resources. Now take a moment. Place your hand on your chest. Feel the weight there, or the emptiness, or the numbness. This is what dorsal vagal feels like. Not calm, not relaxed, but heavy, disconnected, far away from yourself. This is the state financial freeze operates from, and until you shift the state, you cannot shift the behavior. Here is where it becomes most painful, because freeze triggers shame. The inability to act feels like personal failure. You watch yourself not doing what you know you should do. You feel the judgment, your own and others. And shame is added to the freeze. And shame deepens freeze. Research is clear on this. Shame increases withdrawal. It makes people less likely to engage, less likely to seek help, less likely to take action. Shame tells you that you are fundamentally flawed, that something is wrong with you. And when you believe something is wrong with you, the last thing you want to do is expose that wrongness to examination. So you hide, you avoid, you shut down further. The bills accumulate, the shame accumulates, the freeze deepens, and the person trapped in this cycle genuinely believes they are the problem, that they are lazy, irresponsible, and broken. But they are not broken. Their nervous system is doing exactly what it was designed to do under conditions of overwhelm. It is protecting them the only way it knows how, by shutting down, by preventing engagement with a stimulus it has classified as intolerable. The problem is not the person. The problem is that the protective response is being misinterpreted as a character flaw. And that misinterpretation creates shame. And shame reinforces the very state it condemns. Who would you be if the freeze weren't your fault? Not that you are not responsible for your financial situation, but that your inability to engage with it is not a moral failing. It is a nervous system state, one that can be addressed, shifted, worked with, but first it must be recognized for what it is. Freeze, not laziness. Protection, not failure, and from that recognition, possibility opens. This is the part no one tells you. You cannot think your way out of freeze, but you can sense your way out. You cannot force action from shutdown, but you can gradually restore the capacity for action by shifting your nervous system state. You are not meant to do all of this at once. One small shift is enough. And this requires working with the body, not the mind, because freeze lives in the body. The first step is recognizing when you are in freeze, not judging it, recognizing it, learning to notice the sensations, the heaviness, the fog, the sense of being pulled underwater, the numbness, the disconnection. These are not character flaws, these are physiological markers of dorsal vagal activation. And once you recognize freeze, you can begin to work with it. The way out of freeze is not through force, it is through gentle mobilization, through micro movements that signal to the nervous system that action is possible again. Start small, so small it feels insignificant. You do not open the entire bill, you touch the envelope, just touch it, feel the texture, notice that touching it does not kill you. Put it down, and that is practice for now. The next day, you pick it up. You do not open it. You hold it. You notice the weight, the size. You notice your body's response. If freeze activates, if the heaviness comes, you put it down and do something that brings you back to your body. Feel your feet on the floor. Take 3 slow breaths. Move your shoulders in circles. The next day, you open the envelope. You do not read the contents, you just break the seal, and you put it away. You are not avoiding, you are titrating. You are teaching your nervous system that engagement with this stimulus is survivable. That action does not lead to annihilation. This is called pendulation, touching into activation, then returning to resource. Touch and retreat, engage and recover. Building capacity slowly. Another practice, movement, gentle movement, not exercise to exhaust yourself, but movement to discharge the immobilization. Shake your hands, roll your shoulders, sway side to side, walk slowly around the room. The dorsal vagal state is a state of stillness. Movement is the antidote. If you feel yourself getting tired listening to this, that's okay. You don't need to remember all of it. Another practice, connection. not forcing social engagement, but gentle reminders that you are not alone. Text a friend, not about money, about anything. Play music, pet an animal, watch something that makes you laugh. These are ventral vagal cues. They remind your nervous system that safety exists, that the world is not only threat. Another practice, self-compassion. When you notice freeze, when you notice you are once again avoiding the envelope, instead of shaming yourself, you say, "My nervous system is protecting me. It perceives this as dangerous. It is doing its job." And then you ask, what will help my nervous system feel safer right now? Sometimes the answer is not engaging yet, and that is okay. You are not avoiding forever. You are honoring the freeze state while creating conditions for it to shift. This doesn't take years, it takes noticing once. Noticing that you are in freeze and responding with gentleness instead of force. That is the shift, and from that shift, capacity begins to build. The envelope in the counter is still there, but something has shifted. The person approaches it differently now. They recognize the heaviness that comes when they look at it. They do not shame themselves for the heaviness. They understand it as dorsal vagal activation, as their nervous systems attempt to protect them from overwhelm. And instead of forcing themselves to just open it, they work with the state. They touch the envelope, feel the texture, put it down. They have moved. That is not nothing. The next day they pick it up, hold it, notice the weight, notice their breath getting shallow. They do not push through. They put it down and take 3 breaths. They have engaged and retreated. The pattern is shifting. A week later they open it. Read the first line, their chest tightens. They fold it back up. Enough for today. They have touched the content. The freeze did not destroy them. 2 days later they read the full bill. Their body stays present. The fog does not descend. They see the amount. It is what they feared. But seeing it does not shut them down. They can feel their feet on the floor. They are here. The system has not collapsed. And slowly, with patience and without shame, they make the call, set up the payment plan, address what was once unaddressable. Not because they became more disciplined, not because they overcame laziness, but because they shifted their nervous system state from freeze to a place where action was again possible. This is not about becoming productive, it is about becoming regulated. And regulation is not a moral achievement, it is a nervous system capacity that can be built when you work with your physiology instead of against it. But recognize also, financial freeze does not occur in a vacuum. It develops in response to actual financial stress, actual scarcity, actual systems that create instability for millions while concentrating resources among few. Your freeze response is not irrational, it is a rational response to irrational conditions. Individual regulation practices help you survive those conditions, but they do not address the conditions themselves. That requires collective action, systemic change, and the recognition that personal financial distress is often a symptom of a structural violence. You are here because you recognize something: the paralysis, the avoidance, the unopened mail, the unchecked accounts, the delayed decisions, and you have been told this is your fault, that you are lazy, irresponsible, that you need to just do better. But what if that was never true? What if your financial freeze is a nervous system response to overwhelm? What if your body is protecting you the only way it knows how? What if your inaction is not failure but an adaptive response to threat? Then everything changes, because freeze is not a moral condition, it is a physiological state. And states can shift, not through force, not through shame, but through understanding, through gentle mobilization, through working with your nervous system rather than against it. You are not broken, you are frozen, and frozen things thaw. Slowly, with warmth, with patience, with the recognition that freeze served a purpose, protected you when nothing else could, and now, when you are ready, when conditions allow, you can begin to move again. If you are here, you're already questioning whether your paralysis is protection. Subscribing can be a way of staying in the question. If this resonated, if you recognized yourself in the unopened envelope, if you felt the weight of dorsal vagal shutdown, take a moment to like this video. Subscribe for more investigations into the somatic reality of financial trauma. Learning to work with freeze is your responsibility, and the work begins not with forcing action, but with recognizing the state, with meeting yourself where you are, with understanding that your nervous system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Your inaction is protection. Now you can learn to tell your body that protection is no longer required.